Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
It's me.
Ah.
You know, headphones, no headphones, going to Zoom. I have to fix the audio every time. So, fun times.
I'm excited we're using closed captioning again.
It does make it more fun.
I look forward to the many mistakes it will make.
It does like to make some mistakes. It's true. But I'll take it. Welcome, everybody. We will get started in just a few minutes. We'll give people just another few to get on. Happy Thursday.
Hey, Sage.
Hi, Janae.
How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Good.
Good.
We're all getting used to telling our sweet 2020 lies. Yes, no, I'm doing fine.
Right? Doing well, doing well.
Right.
I had made you the co-host of this meeting series, but it didn't show up when you joined, so I forced it. Strange. I'll go look at that today. Make sure that that's still you're set as a host.
Did you add both my SaltStack accounts and my VMware account?
No, I can't add your VMware account. I can only add the one account that's, and I tried to add 2 different email addresses and it only let me add one. So.
Oh yeah, and I may be logged in as in my VMware account right now. That's probably why.
I don't think you are because it would show as a guest.
Oh, okay. Well so then, just Zoom is weird. I ran into that too. I said Ryan is a co-host and it didn't show up. So
weird. Yeah, I'll check on that and make sure. And if I have to redo it, I will.
Okay, you can just manually do it in the settings. Yep. You know.
Yeah. Looks like we've got quite a few people joining. It's great. Welcome, everybody. I'll just give people another minute and we'll get started. Actually, should go and tell people we've started.
The closed captioning says that you're going to tell people you've started stupid.
I started stupid, huh? Awesome. That's great.
I don't know if you're saying we've started in a stupid way or we've started stupid.
That's awesome. I try to watch those a little more carefully. We'll attempt to do that again. Okay, welcome everybody. We will go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Community Open Hour, Thursday, November 5th. I had the 4th on here originally, but I thankfully looked at the calendar and realized it's the 5th today. So welcome to the 5th of November, everybody, since it's Thursday. And I want to just first start off by saying that Janae is our new community manager. Yay!
Yeah.
We're so excited. And so today I will be hosting this meeting and then Janae will be taking over very shortly. And we are thrilled to have her. And I think that everyone will be very excited to get to know her if you haven't already. And thank you for being here.
Excited.
So, yeah. So just really quickly, I have up here on the slides what the open hour is. Those of you that have usually joined know what this is, but just keep it here that this is just a place for us to have, conversations and keep it open. So hopefully people realize that. agenda today is we're just going to talk a little bit about some updates and CVE release. And of course, there's a docs clinic today and any existing steps, and then we'll open that up for discussion, just general Q&A as we roll through that. But first off, general updates. Janae, do you want to do a recap of SaltConf?
Sure. So we did SaltConf, was it just last week? My word. And it was phenomenal. We had, we well exceeded our registration goals and doubled the industry standard for conversion from registrants to attendees, and had really positive feedback from the community and their experience with the conference. Just really great feedback. So it went really well. We're excited seeing what people's experiences were. And for those who are curious about getting those sessions bingeable, we'll get it in time for your weekend. So I know you're all planning on pulling out the Doritos and watching SaltConf 20 recaps this weekend. Don't worry. That's what I'm working on wrapping up this week. So we had, just a lot of great things. If you didn't get swag or you missed something else, reach out to me, but we'll get all those videos posted for your consumption by the end of the week.
Thanks, Janae.
Sure.
So we are looking at a point release after the CVE release, and we were discussing this previously. Those of you that are aware, we have some memory leak issues that we're looking into, and that is a pretty extensive problem, and we want to make sure that we're getting that right. So we've actually moved that date out a week so that we can have some time to really test that and make sure that we're getting that change right. That point release will be the 18th of November. Immediately following that, at the open hour, we will do a community retrospective, and I have a form here that I will also make sure is in the meeting notes, and it will be, part of the links that you get, and we would love to hear from people so that we can get some feedback on that. That is a really just general retrospective, what went well, what didn't go well, what's something that we can do that's actionable that we can commit on. And then during that retrospective, it's not a shame and a blame game, it's totally to self-reflect and then look at what we can change as a team. We are a large community, but we do want to do that introspection so that we can make change and always be continuously improving, because I think that's helpful. So that will be available to people. It's out there now, so the link can be given. And then I don't have anything else that's coming up in events. So this was just a question if Janae had something, or if anybody else had anything they wanted to announce here, if there's some events coming up, virtual events or anything else.
I will just add in here that if anybody has content that maybe they were inspired at SaltConf or something else, but if someone has content that they would like to share with the community as we build out virtual meetups and other community events, I would love to hear from you to know if you have something that we can incorporate into a future meetup or mini conference or whatever else that we are going to be rolling out next year. So just reach out to me, and I'm happy to plug you in and get you in front of the community to present your content, your tips and tricks, your feedback. Would love to hear from you and include you.
Yeah, we've had a lot of success with the working groups and the clinics. So love to hear from anybody else. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I definitely have some more stuff that I could show off for Tiamat as it's evolving.
Cool.
So if you guys have any virtual talks in the future, I could probably show up for one of those and give it some more information on Tiamat, where it's at, and new features, stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah, Randy, I have you on my radar, but you've got to wear the hacks hat again. It's just.
There you go.
There you go. With the hair down, even.
I love it. Excellent.
Yeah, we've had a lot of success, I think, with the working groups and the clinics, and we're looking to just expound on that and to continue those. We have a docs clinic today, and that'll just be later. Here's our information about that. We do usually live stream that. I don't actually have the live stream on today. I think Tyler, maybe you're helping me with that. I don't know that I ever got that fixed.
Yeah, I can help you with that.
Thanks, Tyler. I'm sorry
like,
about that. these have been really interesting. And Janae and I have been talking about how we're going to change these up next year that I think will make them more focused and we can have some more just visibility to those working groups. They're doing a lot of really great things and I'd love to show that off and celebrate what we're doing there and really like, you know, let's show off our success. I think that that's not happening enough and we need to do that.
For sure.
Cool. So the CVE release, I do have the links to the blog post and where to find patches. I should put on here also repo, and these are the CVE numbers. Any questions, any discussion topics, anything we can take as feedback?
Sure. Yeah, so first I want to apologize if I came off a bit gruff in the Slack about that entire situation. I've just I've got a lot invested in SaltStack here at GoDaddy, so the success of the company is obviously important to me. So I feel like the process for how CVEs are handled when presenting information to the community at large could be improved upon. Now, initially my response basically was, well, why don't we put the regression tests, we'll call them, into a separate repo, make that repo private, that runs against Salt via CI/CD. And if security teams want to reach out to SaltStack about getting a POC in order to test internally, that could be done over secure channels without affecting what I feel was probably the primary goal here, which was making sure that too much information wasn't released and that bad actors didn't get a head start on everybody. And that's fine. I mean, I realized the earlier issue this year was way too open and POCs were just being randomly flung into Git and inside of public channels in Slack. And I agree, that's not the right way to handle that. However, this time around, it felt like a knee-jerk reaction that where basically we were told, hey, there's some bad shit coming down or bad stuff coming down the pipeline. You know, be ready, and then no further information. However, another individual suggested in that thread as well, and I'm leaning more towards that, especially after my conversation with Gareth, as he pointed out, due just to the nature of the open source culture around this project, that maybe doing a private repo with those POCs to run via CI/CD is not the right answer. And maybe the right answer is providing as much information as possible as to like, hey, you know, we found some exploits in X package. Here are our recommended steps you take right now, at least, you know, the general hardening tips, but also any specific tips you can give because of the, you know, whatever the attack vector is or the surface is. And you can still go around or you can still continue to do things like not say the exact stuff until the patches are released. And I feel like that would at least give consumers a little more leeway in terms of ensuring the safety of salt within their environments, while still not making it so you guys divulge so much that bad actors have a bit of an edge.
Yeah, it's delicate balance for sure.
Right. I mean,
thank you for that.
The problem is what I don't agree with the policy right now is that nothing was shared up until the patches were released. And like I said, I get it. We don't want to release too much information, but there's still some data we can give to our consumers to ensure that they feel good about how security incidents are handled via SaltStack, and that they feel that the way SaltStack handles those actually provides value to them.
Yeah.
Thomas, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Can't hear me?
Oh,
now
no.
I can.
All right. One of my kids said to me the other day, Dad, you always project. And so I've been trying to be more subtle. Yeah, one of the big challenges, this is a very legitimate challenge when it comes to security disclosures in general. In the past, we've really leaned towards not saying anything before you have the patches out, because the problem they turn into is that all of a sudden we've given hints to hackers as to what those patches, what the vulnerabilities might be before we get the disclosure out as well. And this is actually a topic which is heavily debated all over the place. And so we've always followed the philosophy of we will release, we only release public information once the fix is released. Otherwise, again, we've given hints to hackers as to how to break it without giving a resolution to the public. With that said, every time this run-up happens, for instance, I think it would be, I mean, I debate very heavily on, should we at least just tell people, hey, you're only going to have to update your masters on this. Similarly, with these issues being Salt API related, I think it would make a lot of sense if in the future, for instance, I would really like, and I'd like feedback on this. I've long felt that Salt API should be a standalone project. And
I agree.
Then it would have been a lot easier to say, well, this is a Salt API issue.
Well, and I think the Salt API in general just needs a little bit more TLC right now as well. First of all, I mean, evaluating whether or not that should continue to live in cherry pie is probably one of the first steps. You know, as time has progressed since, you know, cherry pie was the big thing.
But yeah, no,
I
a lot of sense to unify Salt API and the Saltnado into, say, I don't know, an AIO HTTP, make it a separate project, clean that up, get that out of the Salt code base. I'm a huge fan of anything that we can isolate.
Making it more modular would be
code base. Yeah, make things more pluggable.
Yeah. Something to note though is that on CVE 2020-16-846, that one actually would have been in Salt regardless of the API. So the issue there was that the SSH client, if you're running it from the command line, you know, what we were doing with the shell true wasn't necessarily a big deal because we were already in a bash shell. But when we started accepting things over the web, it became an injection issue.
Right. But I think to Thomas's point, he's talking about like setting up boundaries between Salt API and Salt itself. So yeah, the SSH issue would have continued to be there, but we would have at least somewhat minimized the blast radius.
Could I just sort of interject there regarding Salt API and it needing a bit of love? I mean, it's been problematic for some time, security around Salt API. Looking back through the previous changes to Salt API that essentially led to the situation, certainly around 2020 25592, that was, EOS was removed entirely from the Salt API back in 2014 for Salt SSH. So actually there was a period, as far as I can see, where for 6 years you could call Salt SSH entirely unauthenticated against Salt API, and that was patched in CVE 2019-17361. So that sort of, you know, suggests that Salt API has really not been looked at particularly from a security point of view for a long time. And you know that that CVE, which was fixed in January, I mean, it was treated as a bug, but actually, if you read the previous commits and documentation, removing EOS was a deliberate decision, you know, and it was documented as. I really don't understand that as a decision, but it was. So for years, people.
Yeah, my only assumption around that is that back when that decision was made, we didn't, like, we forced people to provide credentials when they were calling the API. Now, I'm not 100% positive of that, but that was...
No, before 29.2.2, you could, if something was set up in a roster, before 29.2.3, if something was set up in a roster, you could with credentials defined in the roster, you could just call that unauthenticated against the API. So I mean, that's sat there for 6 years. And
I personally call that growing pains, though, man. Like,
yeah. Well, okay, actually, yeah, no, I agree. And I think the thing is that probably when Salt API was added, then it was actually, probably not used that much. It was a smaller part of Salt. Whereas now everything is APIs, and people are now using Salt API much more heavily than they were 6 years ago. I absolutely agree about that. But it suggests that we potentially need to look at Salt API in a fairly sort of thorough way and go, actually, what are there any more assumptions and issues that were fine when it when it was originally written as a doc8, a very thin wrapper 6 years ago, and go, actually, is it appropriate to have an API that works in that way currently?
Yeah, so I have a couple of ideas around that. I mean, one of them is really experimental around. I actually expressed some ideas to Tyler about how we could kind of build declarative pipelines using POP to kind of make this weird sort of parse transform and then build a web service from that. It would actually be fairly simple. However, fast API may be the better solution to complete rewrite, and that's been something I've been looking at as well. I know, to your point, like I said, growing pains, the API wasn't really, it hasn't gotten a lot of love over the years I've seen, but when Salt API was written, there wasn't really a need to come back to it, I think, because it was sort of just, like, hey, all the features you'd really need are there. So I think that's part of the reason of why I didn't get a ton of TLC. But yeah, I think like a rewrite into something like fast API may be very useful and allow for any outstanding bugs or issues to be fixed during the rewrite. The other thing is this kind of leads into another topic that I've been kind of talking about to some of the engineers around SaltStack. Is a lot of this could be solved if we could really zero in on bettering our pre-release rigor for SaltStack. Just try and help reduce the amount of releases that are made that are either broken or have too many bugs for people to actually want to upgrade to them.
What kind of things are you thinking in making that more rigorous?
Well, I mean, the immediate answer is always more tests, but I mean, Salt's tested pretty heavily. I
think probably better testing. And we've talked about this on the team as well. We do a lot of like, we're going to test, and we're testing, instead of doing sort of incremental, we're going to test this, and then we're going to test this, and then we're going to test this again, and then we're going to test it more integrationally. And I think that's probably a little more rigorous that we could go.
Yeah, and you guys do have a lot of build pipelines as well. So I mean, you guys, it's not like you guys are doing nothing. It's just I apologize for saying this, but I have noticed over the years that there are a higher percentage of releases across SaltStack's repos that are buggy or broken on the first release than I would expect, given the nature of what SaltStack is. And that's fine. Like I said, I will help with that stuff as much as I can. I understand what's going on. Nothing's ever perfect, but increasing pre-release rigor will only help you gain more consumers and retain your current consumers, and that's fairly important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, just looking to some extent, you're preaching to the choir right now. We've mainly been focusing on pre-release rigor for over a year at this point.
Excellent.
And we've got a long way to go. But I mean, just to give you an idea of where we came from, there used to be a time where, yeah, we had a lot of build pipelines and a lot of tests, but they weren't passing, and we would release without them passing. So now we don't do the release unless we make sure all those builds are actually passing. And we have manual testing that's being done before we release, but we're in the process of automating those tests so that we can add more and go faster.
Yeah, basically just have some smoke tests run before release, make sure everything's in order. That makes sense. I mean, I have more ideas around this. I just needed to distill them into coherent, sentences for you guys.
Yeah.
But if this is already on your radar, then that appeases me enough for now, I guess. But
so Randy, if I can just, sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Go ahead.
It leads into the CVE thing. I mean, these are things that could have been caught prior to release.
So actually, if I could just jump in there, that one of the questions I was going to ask was when you've got a CVE. So for example, the one where that was patched in January of this year, the fix for it was, which then led to the CVE, one of the CVEs we just had. The fix to it was basically it was an incomplete and slightly incorrect fix. And when you get a CVE, do you have a process where you go and have a look at the code around that, and also how do you then review? What's the process where the fix for CVE gets reviewed and signed off internally to say essentially, yes, we have fixed this issue correctly. Yes, there aren't any issues around this bit of code, and do you sort of do any further looking at similar issues within that bit of the code base?
Yeah, we certainly do all of that.
Okay.
So I can speak to like just a little bit about the one that you mentioned just now, Barney, the one in January. So that one, yeah, like in hindsight, it was not a complete fix, but at the time, and yes, it led to like a larger issue that we noticed while fixing another CVE. I mean, a lot of this stuff, like so like this leads into like another point I was going to make that kind of builds on what Randy was saying with our pre-release. Our pre-release like testing, rigor. We put out, sorry?
Rigor.
Yes. So we put out, what's the word I'm looking for?
A release candidate?
Yes, thank you, Sage. We put out RC packages beforehand and have for quite a while, but we don't see much usage from people. Like we announce like, oh, the packages are available, please go test them. Let us know if you find any problems. And that's like something that we've struggled for as long as I've been involved with SolidSec. The Solid project is getting people to test those packages, because we can write all of the unit tests and integration tests to test as much of functionality as we can, but we don't have the resources, people power, CPU power, computer power to test every single scenario that people are using Salt for. So we do heavily rely on the community to test those RC packages. And like I said, like it hasn't gotten the adoption that we would want it to. So if anyone has any ideas how to improve that would be I think a huge help going forward.
Well, that might be worth a separate conversation. Like, how do we evangelize the RC packages in a way that consumers will actually use them?
Right. It's a conversation we would love to have, and maybe we set that as an agenda topic for one of the open hours and invite people to bring discussion topics specific to that.
Right.
Does that sound?
I mean, I've always thought like the biggest hurdle is comes down to like a quote I saw on a slide of someone's conference presentation where like most people have a QA environment and a production environment. Unfortunately, they're the same environment. So I'm sure that's the struggle of like people like trying out the RC packages. They don't want to put RC packages into their production environment and have everything fall over because of a minor or major bug.
Right. And go ahead. Sorry, Barney.
I mean, honestly, with customers I work with, they're not looking at testing RC packages because actually they're probably several versions behind anyway, and even getting them close to that is the big struggle. So yeah,
it's a good point.
Yeah, and I mean, a common sentiment I also tend to hear around Slack and IRC is don't use the initial release, wait for the 0.1. And so with that type of mentality already being spread, getting people to actually try RCs becomes even more difficult.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if we need to rethink that a little bit and what type of rigor we're putting into a major release we need to be putting into an RC package, and maybe even doing more packages, you know, further. We only do latest. Maybe we do need to make that separate.
I mean, we could also
So one thing
change that. I don't know. It's an idea.
It's not uncommon to see if people want to harden things up, they'll do, you know, 6 RC releases before they do
Absolutely
actual release.
Yeah. So one thing that Randy just mentioned that is actually very interesting is the wait for the .1 release. And it sounds like historically, Salt users have treated the .0 release as an RC and the .1 as the production release. And maybe we just need to be either A, embrace that fact, or B, embrace that's what people have been using and explicitly tackle that head on and say, you know, write some blog posts, basically do marketing and outreach and say, look, historically, this is what people have said. We realize that because this is, you know, whatever. But if we want to make this better, we've got to gather together as a community and say, okay, we're going to do something different here. We're actually going to treat the RC as an RC. We're going to install it in our wherevers and make sure that it meets with our use cases, and then you know, file issues so that we can delay the release if we need to, so we can fix the bugs so that the version is actually, you know,
Yeah,
our release versions are solid and ready to go.
So Wayne, that was actually made me think about something. I mean, one way we could tackle this, like you said, is with blog posts, or I know there's documentation on how to like kind of like a POC initially build out your environment using Salt and stuff. And I wonder if we couldn't include RCs for like dev or test or whatever in those instructions as well, to just kind of get that in front of people. I will say that I don't necessarily agree we should embrace the don't use .0 mentality. I think a production release should have the quality of a production release.
So one of the things that we've been talking about for a while is, in addition to having unit tests and integration tests, is having more functional tests to actually test real life use cases for Salt. And so having...
What about... Go ahead, sorry.
No, sorry. I was just temporarily distracted by the closed captioning. That got my statement really, really wrong. Yeah, so like functional tests. So like I've been thinking, like, if we could have some way for people to easily test their actual use case for Salt, their states, their calls to modules, like their infrastructure.
That's Salt check.
Sorry?
Isn't that Salt check? Isn't there a module for that already?
Yes.
Maybe we need to evangelize that.
I think we're talking about a separate environment for people to use, sort of like a lab environment.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't have a separate environment to use. They would have states and things like that they can use, and modules that they can use in use cases, but they kind of need a place to do it in some ways. And we've thought about that a little bit. I mean, that's just one idea.
Containerize that really if they need just a really quick dev environment, stuff like that. Sorry, anyways, Gareth, continue.
No. This is like exactly my point. Like just having somewhere where someone could say, okay, these are my states. Any sensitive information has been cleaned out. Run them through some sort of automated process before a release, and then we can find like the bugs, we can find the problems that people have before we actually release the code. Yeah.
So in a sense, containerizing it is a really good way too, and we could have sort of a bug bounty during that time, and you know, squishing things and tracking it so that people are also coming to us with things we may not have ever thought of. You know, we we tend to think of using SALT in specific ways, and we're continually amazed at tickets that we get, issues that are submitted that we're like, no, how are you using this? We're like, oh, I would have never thought of that, because it is so extensible.
Right. So maybe speaking towards a little bit what you're saying, Gareth, not so much for providing customers with, like, say, either a blog post or a set of states or an article on how to do all of this using this pre-built environment that we've made for them. What about fuzz testing on SALT? You know, basically throwing a ton of inputs at everything and seeing what breaks and where it breaks and going from there. That might be a good idea for pre-release rigor as well. I know there should be some Python fuzz testing libraries out there. But yeah, no, I think that would actually be a good idea. And sorry, to answer your question, Aaron, in the chat, ideally what we would do is provide you with, like, say, a binary built out of a free BDSD or a free BSD container via Tiamat or whatever, and then you could just run that for your RCs so that you don't have to wait for the package to be published and promoted within their repos.
Yeah.
And I'm done hogging the mic.
You're okay. No, I was going to say something and I interrupted you, and I just wanted to circle back to it. I think that if we could get some of these things written down, or if you wanted to, even, we do have a working group called Testing and Release, and they've not had a really good focus. And maybe this is a focus that we could bring to them and say, hey, we have some ideas about this, and it would garner some interest maybe, and maybe we could even pick that back up.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I wasn't even aware you guys had working groups until just today. So basically.
Oh, yeah.
So on the working group front, there isn't a security working group. Would that potentially be a worthwhile thing?
Sure, especially if we have community interest to drive it and attend, and we're looking at making the process for working groups a little more explicit so that they have sort of an exact time frame and a project plan, that's not like 70 pages, but maybe 1 or 2 pages that just gives goals and risks and mitigation and who's on the team and where information can be found, you know, maybe a project board or meeting notes, and then that gets reviewed so often. And so to start one, if people are interested in that, to do a security working group that maybe even would go along with testing, seems like that may, we would just want to start putting that together.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I would be interested in doing that.
Notes or meeting notes, period. But I assume then you guys have like a steering committee that would review those.
So we're just starting a community advisory board in a SEP. Working groups can get started a little bit faster, but yes, that is, you're on the right track there, Randy.
It's similar to how we do things over here at GoDaddy.
Yeah. Yeah, Barney, do you know of other people that may be interested as well?
No, not off the top of my head, but I would definitely be interested in being involved. Randy, I guess you might be interested in that.
Who? What?
Would you be interested in the working group?
Oh, sorry.
Security working group?
Yeah, I could definitely help with it. You know, I think it would be a worthwhile effort. Obviously, anything we can do to improve the security posture of Salt Stack is only going to help us in the long run. So I think that's worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would add, we'd have to delicately handle that group in terms of, you know, disclosing it correctly. I don't know that we can just keep that group open to the public for anybody to join. I don't know how.
No, you make a good point though, because like obviously that if that team is working closely with SaltStack, they may also be privy to certain things that the community at large is not. I don't know if that would ever happen, but it's definitely possible, especially if they're going to be helping with like CVE process and procedure, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sure they would run into that.
Yeah, I don't know if that would actually be how we would approach it, but probably more from a stance of trying to, you know, harden salt as is.
Yeah.
And
sorry. Certainly the way I would envision that would be not necessarily being involved in the sort of practical process of dealing with CVEs, but there've been some issues that have been raised. I think there's a SEP recently regarding what default sort of packaging installations look like in terms of, you know, the whole everything being running, you know, pseudo salt being everything in the documentation about how you should be running salt, and whether or not we should be looking at how we can have a default salt installation that doesn't require everything being run as root, and you know, potentially then looking at things like, you know, the salt API and what can we do proactively, rather than it being something that we would be involved in operational issues around CVEs and so on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that would be fine as well. I mean, obviously that's an easy area for a working group like that to tackle. I just want to make sure I spoke to the point that was made that that group may require a little bit more verification before adding individuals in as well, just because of the potential. I mean, I don't want to I don't want a scenario to pop up where all of a sudden someone's leaking you know, security flaws to the community at large.
Yeah.
I mean, and those things can be discovered as we're pouring through the code and you know, testing security throughout modules and stuff. So it's still a group that I feel like they may want to handle with a little care.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that.
So, sorry, this is my first community hour. Sorry, I'm
welcome.
The COVID haircut, but I had a little feedback on the CVE process, what it looked like internally for my company, and basically when the announcement came to me from another friend in the industry that uses salt a lot, and he said, "Man, it's time. Shut off your salt stuff again." And it's like, oh man, I immediately shut everything off and then went digging around to find out more info on it. And the info initially was extremely light. It's basically big scary stuff. Make sure you're following the best practices. And then when the patches were released and the info was actually announced, I waded through it and looked at a bunch of stuff, looked at the patches and went, man, this didn't affect anything that we're running. Like we don't do the, you know, we don't run Salt API. We don't run any of the extra stuff like Salt Cloud and, you know, any of that stuff. And the way that we actually had our systems implemented, we weren't affected at all. And basically it caused us to spend 2 to 3 days running stuff manually. Without the assistance of Salt due to our environment, you know, we couldn't do Salt SSH or anything like that. And so I know there's kind of a fine line between, hey, this is exactly how you exploit it, and, you know, saying nothing at all other than there's something coming up to make sure your systems are secure. But I would love to see a little bit more info on what's affected in future CVE announcements, even just saying things like, you know, oh, this is a huge vulnerability in Salt SSH. And it's like, well, we don't use that, so I don't really need to worry about it. Or, you know, giving a little more detail without necessarily giving away all the info on how to exploit things would be really helpful.
I don't know if you joined late, but yeah, we kind of
I
dove into that. You're fine. We kind of dove into that, and I echoed a lot of the same thoughts and feelings that you just shared as well. So, and I know there are others as well. Like's been said, it's a fine line to toe, but there's definitely, in my personal opinion at least, improvements that can be made there.
So, just to ask a potentially slightly awkward question, what was the decision behind the timing to do the announcement, you know, on a Friday, the day after SaltConf, if I'm not wrong, and to actually have the patches released on US Election Day? Like, and you know, I don't know, does anyone want to talk us through what the sort of decision process was on that?
It was decided by committee. So there were a lot of people, some heavy hitters that had big opinions. Some of us that had big opinions against that we didn't do that. I won't say who those are, but you know, it was decided by committee. There were some things that we did not, some of us that didn't feel like that was the greatest way to go, didn't have all the information about mergers and things coming up. So there were some people that got to make those decisions in a committee where we didn't always know everything that was going on. So that got decided, but the feedback is still good and we'll still take it back to that same committee.
There's a little more color to that though. Like
sure, Megan, go ahead.
You know, we had to release magnesium because we needed to also include the CVE release and we had to have time to do packaging. So that's a little bit more color to that decision. And I know that we had to get it out for the 4th because I don't know who disclosed it as a trend micro.
We did
have to announce it on the 4th.
Yeah, we did have some timelines to meet for people outside of the company that we're going to announce. That's correct. Thank you for that.
Another thing to note.
Yeah, Norm.
A couple things to note.
Sorry, go ahead.
One thing to note is we were on track to do a release in September for the CVE stuff. And a few days before the release is when we discovered this third CVE. And since the third CVE was in the same part of the code base, touching the same exact stuff, we decided there's no way we can release those two and then have to do another release later on. So we decided to postpone and do all three at the same time. Another thing to note is enterprise customers have time. They're notified of these patches and they have time to upgrade. So we provide our enterprise customers with that as a courtesy to them.
Right, as part of our pay for model.
So you're saying I should have John reach out to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, really in a nutshell, normally when it comes to the timeline of the disclosure, it was just incredibly complicated this time because like DWAS was saying, we found out about these issues right before we were publicly announcing the merger. We found out about them before we could even openly discuss, and just right before we were openly discussing it, the merger internally, we had an extra CVE pop up halfway through that was in the same part of the code base. This was a really messy one for us. And in a nutshell, yeah, I do think that it would make a lot of sense if next time around we are able to come back and at least disclose things on that initial pre-release that says, hey, you should worry about this if you're running Salt API exposed to the internet. And that it might be, you know, we might be able to figure out ways that it is easier to communicate and say, this is kind of what your macro risk scenario is, as opposed to just making everybody panic. And everybody rightfully would panic because we had a really nasty one in the spring.
I'll also point out too that ever since that really nasty one that Tom alluded to just a moment ago, we are now we're now on all of the security researchers' radars. So they are being extra scrutinous about our code, looking for stuff to get both their companies and their personal names out there as finding like popular and exciting exploits. So
actually, sorry guys, just a question.
No, go ahead.
I don't know. I had a conversation and I can't remember whether it was within this forum or it might have been a more private conversation about this, but there was some talk after, I think, that CVE, that an audit had been done. So SaltStack had actually retained a third party to do an audit of the Salt Open code base. Or it may have been before that, and there was some surprise about the fact that actually, you know, an audit had recently been completed, and these issues hadn't been picked up. So I don't know, can anyone talk at all about how, what if anything has been happening around getting third-party audits, whether or not, you know, that's something that's going to happen more in the future, whether or not you think that works at all?
Yeah, so to be completely transparent on internal code auditing, as you're all well aware, we just got acquired by VMware, and they have a number of code auditing requirements that are currently being executed, and they are about to be heightened on all of the code that we have. The only reason they haven't, actually they have started, now that I'm thinking about it. And that said, to our relief, anything that they've looked at, they've said either is really, really minor, to the extent of not even necessarily requiring a CVE, or it is components just around like a dependency. So those audits are just beginning, and again, are being done from the perspective of VMware, who has a lot of experience doing these sorts of things. So moving forward, we are going to have continual security audits, scans, and checks that are mandated by VMware. And so I am excited that we are going to be able to leverage a lot more of those resources that we have inside of VMware to just make this smoother and cleaner.
Great, that sounds really good.
And I don't know that the audit that we did have before brought this up. And in fact, I don't think that it did. It was more general. And that's my understanding, Tom or Daniel, if you guys understand differently, please speak up, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, these CVEs were uncovered by third parties,
right?
Independent third parties.
Yep. But we are looking forward to doing some other things with VMware, and I'm actually really excited about that, because as we went through that internal audit and things weren't found, and then immediately having CVEs come in, it made me question that audit. And I previously, before working for SaltStack, I worked for EMC. And so I am thrilled to have some of these, you know, tools at our disposal to be using. And so I think that will help, and we're excited about that. We do still have a little bit of time. More questions? More feedback? This has been really great. I hope that people feel that this has been valuable for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's helped answer some questions, and like I said, I now know that you guys have actually been focusing on pre-release rigor the entire year, so that makes me pleased. I just yeah, anything I can do to help, would love to help with, including the security working group or whatever. But yeah, no, it's an exciting time for Salto, I feel like, so hopefully everything improves.
Yeah, I think we're seeing incremental improvements for sure, and it's good to see bigger ones come along too.
Yeah, and I should say, I mean, we've seen significant improvements, especially over the last couple of years. And I've said it before, and I'll say it a bunch more times. From a total resource perspective, being inside of VMware should help us significantly. And this is something that I'm really excited about. So we should be able to continue to see improvements like we have over the last few years.
I'll also echo Daniel's comment again, with regard to the test suite. Like, it probably gets overshadowed by some of the issues that come out, particularly like this last one, the memory issue. But we are seeing significant improvements in releases since we've been requiring tests on any and all pull requests that go into the code base. That's been a huge win. There was some grumbling initially from people about doing that, but we're seeing the payoff for it on the fashion, and have those releases slowly get more stable.
Yes,
people don't like writing tests or docs. What? Say it isn't so.
It's true. It's true. And kudos to Wayne for starting the test clinic. I think that has been a tremendous improvement, and where we've seen improvement there, and we're taking note of that and starting the docs clinic, which we're going to have one today. And I encourage people to come to those groups and to help us with those. Let me go back. Where is it? Documentation clinic. There it is. And you can find that on our calendar. That's just a little later today. And we'll start talking about another working group around security and see what we can get started there. Barney, I may just reach out to you, or Janae will, and as we have time, and we'll be excited to get that started.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Anything else anybody wants to go over? We've got about 5 minutes, or we can take off early. If nothing else, then happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you for joining. This has been a fantastic working group.
Yeah,
thanks.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Was Aaron going to say something?
Oh, no, I just said thanks. Thanks for your time.
I'm glad that you joined today. It was good to kind of meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone have a good Thursday.
Oh, good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.